get out your Bibles and open up to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. As always, it's wonderful to see each and every one of you coming together to worship. I don't think we have an empty pew this morning. I was trying to look around, but there are so many people here. And of course, I always like to think that the members that are a part of this congregation are here, but of course, we have so many visitors, and even though several of the visitors here may be strangers to me, it's still so encouraging to see so many people that even that I don't know come together, gather together on the first day of the week to break bread and to worship our God together. A lot of exciting things going on with the congregation here, and it's two announcements. Tonight, Hayden Green is going to be doing the sermon. He's going to be bringing a message tonight's worship service at 5, so be sure to be back here tonight and hear Hayden talk and share a message. As well, tomorrow night, we're going to have start a young adults class at the Benton's house. And that starts at 7, and we're going to be going through Luke. And we put a minimum on the age so it'd actually still be a young adult class. And made it 15 and made that to be the cutoff line. Not, of course, that we don't have many mature 14-year-olds here. We just had to draw the line somewhere. But if you decided that you can come tomorrow and you're in that age group, a young adult, you want to come, please come and tell me that you're coming, or go and tell a Benton that you're coming, just so we can have a head count and have an idea of how many people are going to be there tomorrow night at the Benton's house at 7. Now, in Daniel 7 is what I want to talk about this morning with you. Hayden tonight is going to go over Nebuchadnezzar's vision and how Daniel interprets that vision tonight. And he's going to explain the statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees. What I want to do is I actually want to see a vision that Daniel has, a dream that Daniel has, and I want to bring the throne of God out of that vision, explain what the throne of God does in this particular vision. Before we read it, I want you to put yourself in the setting, and I kind of want you to experience in your head what Daniel's seeing. And what this takes is this takes some imagination. You're going to have to think about these things that we read about here in Daniel 7. But what Daniel says is that he was lying in bed. And he was lying in bed, he had this dream, and he had this vision. And he says that he's standing before a sea. So you picture yourself doing this. You're standing before a sea. And I picture myself standing in front of the Gulf, because that's the only really the large body of water I've ever seen. But you're standing out there, and the water's green. But it's not a pretty day out there. And the reason why it's not a pretty day out there on the sea, because there's these 4 winds from heaven. And these 4 winds are going down into the sea, and they're churning the water. It's almost like this really bad storm is coming. Maybe you can feel the wind hitting your face as it's bouncing off this water. And as you see that it's just this, not a very pretty sight, these 4 creatures start to emerge from the water. And the first one has the likeness of a lion. It looks kind of like a lion. And it has these eagle's wings. And as it comes out of the water, the eagle's wings get plucked out of its body. And then he stands up and he starts walking like a man, and it says that he's given a man's heart. And that's going to be terrifying enough. You're looking at this thing and you don't know if it's going to attack you, what's going on. The second thing you see is a bear. And this bear, with the likeness of a bear, is coming out of the water and has wings as well. But what's special about this bear is what's different is that he has these 3 ribs in his mouth. Like he's just killed something. Like he's just killed this carcass and he's been chewing on these ribs. And when he comes out of the water, you hear this voice and it says, "Arise, devour much flesh." So you see this lion that's walking like a man. Now you have this bear. And the voice is saying, "Devour much flesh." And I'd be worried, is that me? Then, after you have these 2 creatures, you see a third creature come out of the sea. And that third creature that comes out of the sea looks like a leopard. And it has 4 faces. And this leopard, I would be much scared of a leopard because I wouldn't want to turn my back to him. Because leopards are stealthy, they're sneaky, and they can sneak up behind me and attack me. But now I have these 3 creatures that I have to deal with. It says that dominion was given to it. Dominion. Now, I already had these 3 terrible creatures, but then you have a 4th one. And this 4th one is the worst as you've seen so far. Because it's so bad in verse 7 that Daniel doesn't really know how to describe it. All that he knows is that it's different from all the other creatures. It's different. And I think that means that he can't say it has the likeness of something. He can't say this thing that's looking at, it doesn't look like a bear, it doesn't look like a lion. I don't know what it looks like. but it's terrible, and it's ferocious, and it's awful. He really tells us two things. One, it has 10 horns. The other thing is that it has teeth like iron, and he's just devouring everything. And after he devours something, there's residue on the ground, and he stomps on it, and he crushes it under his feet. What's even worse is that after you see this beast come out, 3 of the horns are plucked out, and there's only 1 little horn. And it's even really kind of scary, but this horn has a face. And the face starts talking to you. And he starts using pompous words, telling you about how great he is, how great this beast is than any of the other beasts. I'd be scared out of my mind. I mean, I would think that Daniel would clarify this as a nightmare up to this point. And actually, at the end of the chapter, in verse 28, he says, "This is the end of my account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed, but I kept this matter in my heart." And there again, if you look in verse 15 back, he says, "I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions in my head troubled me." But this was, up until this point, a nightmare. But something changes, and something changes in verse 9 because a 5th figure appears to Daniel. If you read here in verse 9 of chapter 7, that's where we'll pick up reading. Verse 9, chapter 7. "I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and his hair on his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, his wheels of burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came from forth him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000s times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. I watched this because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, for they had dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for the season of a time." And we'll stop there for right now. But you're having this vision if you're Daniel, and you see these terrible things. You see the lion, you see the likeness of a bear, you see the likeness of a leopard, and then you see this 4th beast that's dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong. And it has this horn that's talking like a man speaking these pompous words. And you're terrified, but something great happens next. You see the Ancient of Days seated. And it's almost like he just jumps to this. All of a sudden, the Ancient of Days was seated. And this Ancient of Days is a terrible figure in itself. His garment is white as snow. His hair is like wool. His throne is like a fiery flame, and his wheels are burning fire. And there's this stream of fire coming in front of him. He has thousands upon thousands ministering to him. He has 10,000s upon 10,000s going before him. But what's great about this terrible figure is that you as Daniel, you know who he is. And this is the first figure you've seen in this dream that you know who he is. This is the Ancient of Days. This is God. This is God of my father Abraham. This is God of my father Isaac. This is the God of the nation of Israel. And this is the God that has taken care of me for so long. This is the God that was with me when I was taken into captivity. This is the God that just a chapter ago saved me from the lion's den. This is the God that saved my 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, from the burning fire. This God right here has done nothing but save me. And as soon as he's seated on this fiery throne, as soon as his glory is present, you see what happens next. That big beast that you couldn't even describe is slain. There's not really even a battle here in chapter 7. It's just slain. And it's slain and it's burned. And while that's on fire, he cripples and takes away the power and the dominion of those other 3 creatures, but he allows them to live for a time. It's almost like I'm going to take away everything from you, but I'm going to allow you to exist just for a time. The God is here, and he's on his throne. Everything changes when the Ancient of Days is seated on his throne. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the throne. Because when he's on his throne, things happen. Things change because he's God. Now, in this particular moment here, he's talking about the 4 kings that are going to arise. And I want to say that because Hayden's going to talk about that tonight in the other vision that Nebuchadnezzar has. But what happens is after he slays this beast and after he takes away dominion, the Son of Man, as Daniel says, comes down from the heavens and appears before him. And of course, the Son of Man is what Daniel called him. We called him Jesus Christ. Verse 14 says, then to him, this is Jesus, then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. And so what God does here, sitting on his throne, is take the dominion of those four beasts, and he gives it to the Son of Man. And the Son of Man actually has more dominion because his dominion is everlasting. There's not going to be another person that's going to come and take his dominion away. This is going to be it. So the Son of Man has dominion. You see that the throne of God has absolute dominion. There's nothing that's too powerful for him. And when you read and you study and you learn that these represent these different kings, Greece, the big empire of Greece had nothing on the throne of God. The great empire of Rome had nothing on the throne of God. God just took their dominion away and gave it to his Son. Because that's what his will was. That's what he decided to do. What's also great about this throne is that it's unchangeable. That the man who sits, the figure that sits on this throne, does not change. And his dominion does not change. Do you remember in 1 Kings 12? In 1 Kings 12, the Israelites have a problem. That problem is that Solomon's dead, and Rehoboam and Jeroboam are kind of fighting over who's going to sit on the throne. It ends up being, this is when the nation is divided, right? And you remember, if the people go to Rehoboam, they ask him for help. Because they're going to have to deal with, a lot of us here on this earth deal with, is governments change. Authority changes. And they say, Rehoboam, could you please make our life easier than it was with your father? Now Rehoboam makes a foolish decision. He goes to his foolish friends instead of his wise leaders that were sitting on the council. And he goes with their advice and says, I'm just going to make it more difficult for you. And we worry about that today. We have governments that change. And when governments change, policies changes. And we get worried and we get distressed. But this authority never changes. And the Son of Man that sits at the right hand of the throne of God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. The laws that he made, the rules that he made, have stayed the same. The policy is not going to change on you. This is something that you don't have to worry about. You're free. In Isaiah 54, I don't know if I want to take the time to read it, but in Isaiah 54, he brings up Noah. And he says, Noah, there was a world that was in a flood. He has the ark, he's saved. And what does God do? God sends him a rainbow. And the rainbow is a reminder that the promise is going to be kept. That God will never flood the earth in the way that he did with Noah ever again. And God says there, I'm going to keep that promise. No matter what, the throne isn't going to change. My mind isn't going to change. My policy isn't going to change. I'm not going to do it ever again. You don't have to worry and you don't have to beg God, God, please don't flood the world like you did back in Noah's day. You don't have to ask that because he's not going to do it. Because he's an unchangeable God on an unchangeable throne. And what he brings up there later in Isaiah 54 is not only is he going to flood the world, but his covenant of peace, the covenant that we live in, is not going to change. His mercy is not going to change. His grace is not going to change. Because his covenant is not going to change. Because he has absolute dominion. And that absolute dominion is unchangeable. Now, let's go to Ezekiel. We're going to cover 3 prophets this morning. We're going to cover Daniel, which we just did. Now we're going to cover Ezekiel. And then we'll move on to Isaiah. All 3 of these seeing the throne of God. In Ezekiel's vision, he's a priest of Israel. And he's actually living the same time as Daniel, if we know that. He's living during the same time as Daniel. He's taken into captivity. And now he's taken with this second group. And they're waiting there in the land of the Chaldeans at the river Cherub. The river called Cherub. And he's there. And I imagine that Ezekiel is very stressed out. And almost more so, at least Daniel probably had a pretty good life by that point. Obviously, he had just been thrown in the lion's den. So you have to bring that up. But he's sleeping in a bed, and he at least actually has a bed to have this dream in. Ezekiel's kind of in a different situation because right now, he's still in captivity. He's still a slave to Babylon. As he's a slave, he's waiting out with the captives out at this river. And in this stress, he has a vision. And what this vision is God is calling upon Ezekiel to take up the mantle and to to teach the people that he's going to send him to. And this is how he does it. In Ezekiel 1, if you see on verse 2, On the 5th day of the month, when it was the 5th year of the king Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressively to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzzah, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was upon there. Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing him, and brightness was all around it, radiating out of the mist of the color of amber, out of the mist of the fire. From within came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of man. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves, and they sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. So we'll stop there and recap. Ezekiel's out here, and he sees this whirlwind coming towards him, almost like a tornado, as we would call it. And this thing is coming towards him, and inside, engulfed in this whirlwind, is a burning fire of a cloud. And you see this, awestruck figure, and there's this storm coming towards you with fire inside it. Again, a very scary thing to look at. But he has these 4 creatures that emerge from the whirlwind. Now, these 4 creatures are very different from the ones that Daniel sees. These are totally different. What these are cherubim. And we're going to get that later, and we're not going to read it, but in chapter 10, he names them cherubim, I think because he sees them at the river Chebar. He names them after the river. But these creatures that come out are bringing forth God. They're bringing forth the throne. And these creatures in themselves are terrifying. It says that their skin's like bronze. Later in the chapter, he says that when their wings flap, their wings are like many waters. It's almost like, maybe you feel like the falls of Niagara. And it's just so loud because of all that water's coming down. That's what it sounds like when their wings are flapping. He continues to go on, and he says that they have 4 faces. They have one that's an ox, one that's a lion, one that's a man's, and one that's an eagle. And as they fly around, and this is what I think Ezekiel is most impressed by, is the way that they move. The way that they move is interesting because they don't turn. They never turn. They can go anywhere they want to, and apparently they're flying around him, but they're never turning. They're just going. If we look there in verse 12, and each one went straight forward, and they went wherever the Spirit wanted to go, and they did not turn when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and out of the fire went lightning. And with the living creatures ran back and forth in appearance like the flash of lightning. That these things, when they're moving like lightning. Speed is not a problem for them. They go anywhere that the Spirit wants them to go, and they get there as fast as they want. And these are these terrifying 4 creatures that are with the throne. While we know what they're with the throne is because you see that they're somehow connected to the wheels that Ezekiel sees that comes out of this throne. If you look in verse 17 through 21, 17, when they moved, talking about the cherubim, they went forward any one of the 4 directions. They did not turn aside when they went. As for the rims, they were so high, they were awesome. And their rims were full of eyes all around the 4 of them. When the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures were lifted up on the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whenever the Spirit wanted to go, they went. Because there the Spirit went, and the wheels were lifted together with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When they went, they went. When those went, these went. And those stood. And when they lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up together with them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. So on this throne, there are wheels. And if you get that, there are wheels on the throne. He keeps on bringing that up. And somehow the cherubim are connected to the wheels. And he says that when the throne moves, the cherubim move. And when the cherubim move, the wheels move. Because they're somehow connected. This is the only throne I know of in existence that can move. Do you know of another throne that can move? A physical throne that can move? I don't know of one. I never know of an earthly king that was going to build a throne and said, you know what, I want wheels on this throne. But this is what God wants. And God has these creatures that kind of pull these wheels in front of them. What that tells me is that this throne can go anywhere at any time. When it moves like lightning, it can get there at any time it wants to be. And being that there's wheels on it, it can go anywhere. Usually when a king wants you to appear before him, doesn't he call you to him? He says, Andrew, you need to go and you need to come up to the kingdom and you need to come before my throne. But this isn't what God does. God comes to them. When Isaiah sees the throne, which we'll read in just a minute, God appears before him when Isaiah's in Judah. Daniel has his vision in Babylon. Ezekiel has his vision at the river of Chebar. This throne goes anywhere the Spirit wants to go. What I take from that is that it can find you. It can find you. You can't hide from the throne of God. And everyone one day is going to have to stand before the throne of God because it's going to find you. Now, there's a positive outlook to this as well. It can also find you in your time of distress. If you're familiar with Hebrews 4:16, therefore let us come boldly to the throne of grace that we obtain mercy and find grace in the help in the time of need. This throne of grace can be there when you need it to be. This is a God and a king and a ruler that has all dominion that comes to you to help you. This is the type of throne that he's on, that it's mobile. It's mobile. He can go anywhere he likes if you need him to. It can find you, and it can find you in the time of your distress. Another thing that I want to pull out of Ezekiel, and I understand that here in the middle is when he actually describes God. And of course, I don't want to skip that and overlook that completely, but I'm trying to focus on the throne. If I focus on what's sitting on the throne, that's a whole other sermon. But this is just the throne. In verse 28, and I almost missed this verse when I was studying. I feel really bad that I almost did. Verse 28, like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the brightness all around it. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of the one speaking. And he explains that there's this brightness around God. And this brightness around the throne of God is like a rainbow. It's so strange to me. And of course, this stuff can't be made up because it's something that we wouldn't write written down. It's just men. But when you have a God of fire sitting on a fiery throne with these terrible wheels and everything's awesome, and you have these creatures that pull it forward, that there would be a rainbow around it. Yet our God, his throne, has the likeness of a rainbow around it. And what he says is what that rainbow is, that likeness of a rainbow, is the appearance of the glory of God. That is what the glory of God is. It's like a rainbow that goes around the throne. Wednesday night, if you were here, you know it was storming terribly. We decided that we were going to go kayaking on Thursday because obviously it was thunderstorming on Wednesday. We should be safe Thursday, right? That seems logical. Well, we did. It worked out. A lot of us went kayaking. We went there and we beat the storm. It was clear and it was pretty while we were there. But then after we were on the drive home, it started storming, and it stormed throughout the night. The next morning, dark 30, I had to take my buddy to the airport. So I drive him to the airport. Of course, I'm not happy about it because it's 5:30. But drop him off, say goodbye, and I'm going back. And as I'm going back, the sun's rising. And the storm is kind of getting pushed away. And I'm sitting there at a red light, about to get on the interstate to get back to 65. And I see a rainbow. And it's going right over the city of Birmingham. What was amazing to me at first was how big it was. That it was going over the entire city. And as you see this rainbow, there's only one thing that people do when they see a rainbow. And that's this. That's all you can do. You just have to look at it. And I looked to the person to the right of me that was sitting at the stoplight, and guess what that guy was doing? We were both just sitting in these cars staring at this rainbow. And even people that have their phone out, and we talk about how we get glued to our phones, you see a rainbow, what do people do? They'll even put their phone down to look at the rainbow. When we see the glory of God, what does it make us do? We just have to stop what we're doing and we have to look at it. Because that's what the glory of God is. You see the glory of God in nature, you just have to stop and you have to look at it. You see the glory of the God in the Word, you have to stop and you just have to look at it. Because that's what the glory of God is. It's like a rainbow. What's really interesting about this is there's actually an optical phenomenon that this happens in nature. That there's a rainbow that's a full circle. And you can only see it maybe on a mountain or in an airplane or on a tall building. The fog has to just be just right, and the sun has to be coming right through in the perfect angle. It actually makes a full circle rainbow. Guess what it's called? It's called a glory. And I think it's because they got it from this verse. What is the glory of God? Well, it's like a rainbow. It's like a rainbow around the throne of God. With the throne comes all dominion, and with the throne comes glory. I think really if you want to look for a theme of Ezekiel, the theme of the Ezekiel is the glory of God. And it's like a rainbow. Now, let's turn to the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah sees the throne of God. Isaiah 6. Interesting enough, Isaiah doesn't spend a lot of time actually talking about the throne. He talks about these creatures that he calls seraphim that are ministering to God and ministering to Isaiah as himself. But it says that in the year of Isaiah, verse 1 died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings, and 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. Notice what the seraphim bring out about the throne. It's maybe something we haven't covered yet. But what the throne resembles and what they pronounce before the throne is the holiness of God. The Lord sitting on the throne is holy. And every time it mentions the word holy, he always has to say it 3 times. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. That's just how holy he is. But you have to say it 3 times. If you want to encompass a word that is God, usually we go to love. And I think that's okay. And I understand that God is love. And a lot of things can be summed up with love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and your mind. Jesus says that. This is the first and great commandment. But as well, I would put with that, if you want to describe God, God is holy, meaning that he is set apart. He is so different from us because of his holiness, because of his righteousness. And everything that's holy on the earth that we see belongs to him. We call this the Holy Bible, don't we? Why? Because it belongs to God. It's his word. That belongs to him because it's holy. Now, what do you think is going to be the immediate reaction when you see God in his full glory, in all of his holiness? Well, you would have the reaction that we're about to read. This is what Isaiah says in verse 5, seeing this. He says, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of the people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Woe is me, for I am undone. Isaiah realizes, I can't stand here and look at this. I can't be here before the throne because I'm the opposite of the thing on the throne. I'm the opposite of the throne. I'm not holy. And I imagine Isaiah was thinking about all the things that he said in his past that were wrong, all the cruel things he said that he never had a right to do, the reason that he lives in the world and he hears cruelty of coming out of other people's mouths, and he thinks about all the bad things he's done in his past. I can't be here. I don't know what to do. And if you realize this has always been the biggest problem between us and God. We can't be together because he's holy and we're not. Now this is what Jesus came to reconcile. But in Isaiah's case, a seraphim comes with a coal and he touches his mouth. In verse 7 he says, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away and your sin is purged. Now, for this coal, it purges the sin. For us, God has wiped away that sin with the blood of Jesus, reconciling us so we can be before the throne of God. And hence again, Hebrews 4:16. You can boldly now become before the throne of grace. We can be like him, and we can be in his presence in his throne because of what Jesus has done for us. Another thing about this vision. Verse 8. Also I heard the voice of the Lord, saying, Who shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here am I, send me. What I take from this is when the voice from the throne calls, the righteous answer. that first Isaiah is scared to be here. He says, I'm done. But the seraphim gives him this coal that takes care of that problem, kind of purges his sins. And the Lord asks, on this giant throne full of fire, and maybe if it's like Ezekiel's, it has these wheels. He has all dominion. His robe in Isaiah is filling throughout the temple. This big, massive figure says, who will go? Who shall we send for us? Who will go for me? And this little bitty guy, Isaiah, is standing by this throne. Nothing compared to what's on the throne. And he says, here am I, Lord. Send me. That's the way a righteous man or a righteous woman reacts to the call of God. When he calls you, when he needs help, he says, who's going to go for me? The righteous says, here am I, send me. I will go. I will do what you need me to do. These are three visions that we get, that we kind of feel the throne of God and get an idea of what it's like to be in the presence of God. I put a blank slide up here because I want to answer the question, so what? So you know what the throne's like. You understand that this is God who sits on the throne. This is the Ancient of Days. So what? Well, this is so what? When we worry about our creatures that come out of the sea and try to get us. When you're in life and you're sitting there and you have the leopard that comes out, you have the likeness of a bear comes and tries to get you, the likeness of a lion or a beast you can't even describe. And we have things that come after us. We have family problems. We have church family problems. We have problems with the world when we worry about the government and the ever-changing policies and the ever-changing throne of the earthly thrones. When we worry about those things. When we see that beast we just can't describe, our own sin problem, what takes care of all those things is when the Ancient of Days is seated. Guess who's still on the throne? God is still on the throne. I have a family problem. Guess what? God's still on the throne. I have a church family problem. Guess what? God is still on the throne. I worry about things of this earth. Guess what? God is still on his throne. When I worry about my sin problem and I'm looking for help and I'm looking for guidance, guess what? God is still seated on his throne. And he has all power and he has all dominion, and he can aid you. He can come to you because his throne has wheels, because his throne is made the way it is. If there's anyone here this morning that has decided to follow Jesus and has decided to come before the throne of God, calling on the name on the Lord, asking him to save you the sins, if there's any way we can spiritually assist you this morning,